أعزائي المشاهدين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أسعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير. نرحب بكم مجددا في حلقة جديدة من برنامج الحد الأدنى، ولكننا ننتقل في هذه الحلقة إلى مدينة ميونخ عاصمة إقليم بافاريا، حيث نسجل هذه الحلقة في متحف ميونخ للمصريات الذي يضم قسم السودان العامر بالآثار والأيقونات السودانية التي تعكس عمق وأصالة الحضارة السودانية القديمة. يسعدنا في هذه الحلقة أن نستضيف البروفيسور فيلدوم، عالم الآثار الألماني الذي قضى كثير من سنين حياته يبحث ويستكشف في آثار السودانية القديمة. بروفيسور فيلدوم إضافة إلى أنه صديق للسودان ومهتم باكتشاف هوية السودان التاريخية، هو عالم آثار تخرج من جامعة ميونخ ودرس الدكتوراه في فرنسا، وعمل مديرا لمتحف ميونخ للمصريات، ومن ثم مديرا لمتحف برلين للمصريات. عمل في مصر أيضا في مجال الاكتشافات، ثم تحول نظره إلى السودان، حيث قضى 20 سنة الأخيرة من عمره في اكتشافات متواصلة في منطقة النقع، حتى توجه باكتشافات كبيرة جدا شهد بها العالم بعد فترة طويلة. بروفيسور فيلدوم هو سلسلة من الشخصيات التاريخية والآثارية من علماء الآثار الذين قدموا جهود كبيرة جدا لاكتشاف الحضارة السودانية. التاريخ يعود إلى ليبسيوس 1841، وثم توقف التاريخ أيضا إلى جهود هينكل من جامعة هومبولت الذي قدم أيضا كان يعمل لمصلحة الآثار السودانية، وترك إرشيفا ضخما جدا حتى الآن موجود سنتعرض له في هذه الحلقة. بروفيسور فيلدوم هو آخر العلماء الألمان الذين يعملون في مجال اكتشاف الحضارة السودانية، حيث كان هو مديرا لمشروع إعادة اكتشاف النقعة من جديد. Professor Veldum, it's our pleasure meeting you and having you in our TV show, talking to the Sudanese audience, Sudanese viewers, about your contribution personally and the German efforts discovering the Sudanese ancient civilization. Welcome to our show.
أهلا بك.
أهلا بك. Our first question will be, you are an Egyptologist. You focus in Egypt, studying the ancient Egyptian civilization. But you focus to work in Sudan. The first question will be, what motivated you to have study Sudanese civilization? Is it like Charbonnet went to Sudan to discover Egypt there, but he said that he found not Sudan in Egypt, but Egypt in Sudan? So what motivated you to go to Sudan?
First, I wanted to start classical philology, Latin and Greek. I went to Munich University, and then I discovered there is in Munich University an institute of Egyptology. I didn't know before. And I went there, and I found this institute full of books with things I had no idea about, and this was an enormous challenge. And I gave up classical philology after half a semester and decided to become an Egyptologist. This was for many decades my life. And I was absolutely happy as an Egyptologist, discovering new things, opening an excavation in the north of Egypt, in the delta between Cairo and the Suez Canal. And then my colleague Sylvia Schuske, now director of this museum in Munich, one day told me, I will go to the Sudan. I will be the guide of a study tour to the Sudan. Will you come with me? And so I said, why should I? I'm absolutely happy in Egypt. I don't need anything else. And I said goodbye when she left Cairo by a Unimog caravan to Aswan, Wadi Halfa. And when she came back, she was so overwhelmed by the beauty of the country, by the people, and by the almost untouched, unknown monuments. And I think this was in '85. This was the first time I started to consider to go one day
to the
Sudan. But it took years and years. I left Munich, I became museum director in Berlin, and one of my first activities as museum director in Berlin was to organize an exhibition about Sudan, about the treasure of Amani Shaheto, half in Munich, half in Berlin. And the most important consequence of this exhibition of Amani Shaheto's treasure was the invitation by the late Ahmed Hakim, General Director of the Antiquities Department in Khartoum, who invited me to come to the Sudan. He traveled around with me for a few days, and at the end of this trip, it was clear for me this experience will change my life. And it did.
It's 20 years right now working in Sudan. It's 20 years working in Sudan.
Yeah. This first encounter with the Sudan in '92 has changed completely the main orientation of my scholarly work. I would even say nowadays I am no longer an Egyptologist. I have been an Egyptologist, but now I am an archaeologist, Sudan archaeologist, and this is under so many aspects something absolutely thrilling.
Sudanese people feel very proud of your contribution to uncover the Sudanese ancient civilization. But we'll start from your last statement. I mean, Egyptology is very dominating in archaeology. But right now, the new discoveries and new findings in this field indicate that it might be high time for the Sudanese ancient civilization to be studied independently from Egyptology. Do you think there is possibility to establish a Sudanology at this time?
I think it has already been done. In German-speaking archaeology, it was after World War II, especially Berlin, East Berlin, in former German Democratic Republic at Humboldt University, Professor Fritz Hinze, who made Sudan studies his main interest and changed an Egyptological institute at Humboldt University to an institute called Institute of Egyptology and Sudan Archaeology. This was absolutely unusual at this time, and now this was in the late 50s. Now, more than half a century later, Munich is on the way to become a second center of Sudan studies. At the university, we have now a job for a professor for Sudan studies, Professor Julia Butka, excavating on Sai Island and doing a lot of different projects. The museum, which is still called State Museum of Egyptian Art. Could also be called State Museum of Egyptian and Sudanese Art. And
this is great, yeah.
To the Naga project, taken over by the Munich Museum in 2013 from the Berlin Museum. Also, this museum is now one of the most active institutions in Sudan archaeology, and it's strange that this new development of the scientific focus of this museum finally goes back to 1839, almost 2 centuries, wow, when the Bavarian king Ludwig I has acquired a complex of Sudanese jewelry, the famous treasure of Amani Shaheto. This could have been the starting point for Munich as a center of Sudanese studies. We had to wait almost 200 years
We're coming to that.
fulfill it.
but I mean, the Prussian king, Frederick William IV, sent Lepsius, 1841, to Sudan. Was it early discovery and interest from this part of the world to study Sudanese archaeology and Sudanese ancient civilization? What was the idea of the Prussian king at that time to send Lepsius to Sudan?
It's a very, very important and highly interesting question.
Worldwide,
Berlin at this time had already a highly interesting Egyptian collection with Egyptian antiquities, but when this museum devoted to the study of any kind of antiquities was inaugurated in 1830, the scientific committee developing the program for this museum insisted to exclude Egypt, since Egypt was not part of a deeply European understanding of antiquity. This understanding started human civilization on the Acropolis in Athens, 500 BC. Everything before was pre-Greek in a negative connotation. Munich at this time was different. Ludwig I, who acquired some years later the Meroitic treasure, erected a museum near to this place on the King's Square, the Glyptothek, inaugurated in 1830 as the museum in Berlin, devoted to Greek and Roman antiquities, but he insisted that the great first hall of this museum of Greek and Roman antiquities would be the Egyptian room, to, as he expressed himself, show the fundament of Greek civilization. So the Bavarians at this time knew already the importance of Egypt. Prussia had to wait for the successor of Frederick William III, to Frederick William IV. He had a feeling for the importance of Egypt, and he gave the money to a young scholar, Richard Lepsius,
from Britain,
who wanted to make an expedition to the Nile Valley. And it is absolutely extraordinary that Lepsius, planning this expedition to Egypt from 1842 to 1845, from the very beginning included the Nubian and Sudanese Nile Valley in his project. We have to remember that Bonaparte,
yes,
in 1798, gave up at Aswan Philae.
Yeah.
His scientists didn't go beyond the island of Philae immediately south of Aswan. 27 years later, François Champollion, who had deciphered the hieroglyphs, started for his great Egypt expedition to document all the monuments on the Nile, he gave up at Wadi Halfa. And there is a letter by Champollion where he writes to his family, "I am only thinking of Paris and to get home." So he turned at Wadi Halfa. And
he couldn't stand the harsh weather there. But Cairo, I think there is in the historical record, the expedition of invading Sudan by Muhammad Ali Pasha. Two French archaeologists, one of them is Cairo, that he made the first documented writings and description about the archaeology in northern Sudan. And I think Lepsius built on that. But I will come to Amani Shakhitu treasure. The Italian doctor, Ferlini, was there also in Sudan, and he discovered this treasury of Amani Shakhitu, and he took it from the pyramids. What made the king of Bavaria interested to buy this treasury from him?
Simply the beauty of these pieces. He declared once that his criterion for buying works of art, not only antiquities, but also paintings, are twofold. First, highest quality. Second, lowest price. And apparently the treasure of Amani Shakhitu fulfilled both conditions. It was not too expensive, it was extremely beautiful, and it was something unknown to the world of arts at this time. So it was for him a self-confirmation as a connoisseur who finds the extraordinary and who has the courage to acquire the extraordinary even if it is unknown, and in this case of the Amani Shakhitu treasure, not only unknown, but also very dubious, very doubtful. Specialists thought these jewels coming, according to the report by Giuseppe Ferlini, published in Italian, from the Sudan, are simply forgeries. They didn't believe that such things could exist in antiquity, and the most extraordinary of this treasure, according to Ferlini's report, coming from an area where no other antiquities were known. They came from nowhere. They came from a vacuum in the map of the ancient world. Sudan was inexisting.
Visitors of museums in Munich and Berlin, when they saw this treasure, they couldn't believe at that time Sudan was well developed in manufacturing such jewelries like this. So sophisticated, highly colored, high quality, and full set of jewelries for the queen at that time. Does this give indication how far the industry and the ancient civilization was developed comparing to the contemporary other civilization at that time? We couldn't find such jewelry in this quality and sophistication like in Egypt at the same time. Is this a sign of development and highly sophisticated civilization at that time?
This is a question of general importance. I think even today, not only the public but also specialists in archaeology are under the impression that ancient Sudan is just a kind of southern dependence of ancient Egypt, without individual qualities, without political independence. And I remember quite well when I studied Egyptology in the 60s, Kerma, the city of Kerma, was the residence of an Egyptian governor controlling the Sudan under pharaonic rule. It's 50 years ago. This was the time when Charles Bonnet started his excavations at Kerma and very soon gave the definite proof that Kerma is exactly the contrary of the residence of an Egyptian governor ruling the foreign country. Kerma is the capital of the first independent kingdom of Africa, which from time to time went northwards to Upper Egypt. So I had to change my opinion. What I learned during my studies was simply wrong and didn't correspond to reality, proven now by archaeological excavation.
Professor Wildung, you are one of the strongest voice, always trying to say that the civilization of the Nile Valley started in the south first, as you have showed us in the room of Sudan. Is this a well-known fact right now? Because some people argue this is not true. You have proved that some potteries goes back in history to 10,000 years old, older than the Egyptian one. And it has indicated that civilization of the Nile Valley started in the south. Is this a common fact right now in the archaeological world or not?
Unfortunately, not yet. We are on a good way. We have very, very strong arguments to make public this new picture of Sudanese history. We have archaeological facts. Our mission to stress the importance of the Sudan as a cradle of civilization in the Nile Valley is not based on scholarly theories. Is not
real findings.
Is not based on work in our libraries, but these are archaeological facts of our excavations. And I think it's very important and characteristic for Sudanese studies in Sudanese archaeology, that all people active in this field now are active in archaeology on the spot in the Sudan. One of the leading colleagues, Claude Relly, from the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in Paris, is the only one right now who starts to understand and to translate Meroitic texts. This is a highly intellectual work, but this Claude Relly, deciphering the Meroitic language, is at the same time the head of the archaeological mission in Senegal. He's excavating, and I think this is real science, to produce in the field, in the sand of the Sudan, the facts, the objects, and then to return home and to study these pieces. That's what we are doing now. I just finished the first volume of the Naga publication, Naga Volume 5, sculpture, with more than 100 pieces of sculpture in the round excavated by our mission. First, we excavated for 20 years. And many people asked us, why don't you publish? I said, it's not yet the time. We have to continue the excavation. These preliminary reports can just give a first idea. We are patient. We take our time. And now, after 20 years of work in Naga, we have finally reached the point to publish the results. And in general, Sudanese archaeology is in the process of revolution of the idea of the history of this country.
أعزائي المشاهدين، بهذه الشرح المستفيض حول قضية السودان، تاريخه وحضارته وتكوينه ووعي الذاتي كما أفاد بروفيسور فيلدونغ في معرفة نفسه، نتوقف في استراحة قصيرة ثم نعود لمواصلة هذا الحوار الممتع، ونحن نقلب صفحات التاريخ مع البروفيسور فيلدون. فابقوا معنا. نرحب بكم أعزائي المشاهدين مرة أخرى، ونحن نواصل الحوار مع البروفيسور فيلدون حول هذه السياحة الممتعة حول التاريخ. You have proved by the findings that you displayed and you presented that is the civilization in Sudan was so unique, independent from any other influence, or as you have shown us before, you said that you have some reservation about that Sudan get some elements from the other civilization, from Greek, from Egypt, from other civilization, but you have a strong preservation about the word influence. You said that that Meroitic ancient civilization was independent, was original, but it takes what it wants rather than just get influence from outside. Can you explain this point to us?
We read still today in actual publications about ancient Sudan, and there is now an increasing number of very, very good publications about the civilization of ancient Sudan. We still read almost everywhere that the Sudanese civilizations, starting at Kerma, going on at Kushite and Nabatean times, and finally Meroitic times, are under the direct influence of Egypt.
Yes.
I try to give the proof that this is a wrong way of thinking, a wrong way of looking to this civilization. The Kerma civilization is completely independent from Egypt. And one point concerning Kerma, one of the main divinities venerated in Kerma was a ram,
yes,
Kharuf. And this ram of Kerma was introduced by the Egyptians to Egyptian religious iconography only several centuries later in the 18th dynasty in the New Kingdom. In former times, the Egyptian god Amun was represented as a man in human shape. In the New Kingdom, the Egyptians took from the Sudan the animal shape of their god, and if you see nowadays the rams in front of the temple of Abu-Nare in Karnak, these are Sudanese divinities in front of the most important Egyptian sanctuary. And this is a convincing point of the leading role of the Sudan, and I could add many, many other examples. So I have a very, very strong mission in my mind to free ancient Sudan from its Egyptian heritage, which doesn't exist in this way.
This will bring us back to your findings in Naga. I mean, you have discovered a lot of temples, for example, but there is a common features. That is, Naga has gotten a lot of factors from other civilization. We found Greek influence, we found Egyptian influence, we found Meroitic influence, but there is an ability to make that so independent from the others. And you said before that the Meroitic civilization was a bridge between Africa and the Mediterranean. Is that in conformity with the other theory, that is, this land was geographically isolated and not connected with the other civilization and contributed positively to the humankind of history in that time?
This role of the ancient Sudanese historical epochs as a bridge, not between the Mediterranean and Africa, but between Africa and the Mediterranean.
Okay, the other way around.
This is a little difference, but it gives us the right point of view. Looking on the ancient Sudan, we should look to this region from the south to the north.
Yeah.
And not from our typically European viewpoint from the north to the south.
This is very interesting point.
Looking down. The ancient Egyptians did it. They looked down from the north to the south. This poor Sudanese, this poor Nubians. The reality was different. They were so afraid of the cultural power, also the political power of the Sudanese. But we, as modern Europeans, we inherited this look from the north down
to the south.
I wonder, by the way, if this is an anthropological problem. This is everywhere in the world. Perhaps the Egyptians are not guilty. This is
an
anthropological feature. Very, very funny.
This will bring us to the question of Meroitic script. Why deciphering of the Meroitic language takes so long? Till now we couldn't understand the meaning of the symbols. But could you tell us about the effort going on right now to decipher and understand the Meroitic language?
The Meroitic language is something very, very strange for science, for linguistic studies. We have proof by personal names, by place names, that an independent Meroitic language goes back to the period of Kerma or even before. But the Meroites, the Napatans, the Kushites, and the Kerma people over millennia didn't have any need, didn't see any need to write their spoken language. For them, the oral communication from mouth to mouth was not only equal to written communication, but superior. Written text can be lost. Oral communication delivered from the grandfather to the father, to the son, to the grandson, can't be destroyed. For them, oral communication was the perfect means of human communication. And only in foreign policy and foreign trade there was a certain need of written texts. And for these texts, the Sudanese civilizations used a foreign language, Egyptian, and a foreign writing system. The most ancient Meroitic texts written down date most probably to the 2nd century BC. This means for millennia, these civilizations in the Sudanese Nile Valley lived comfortably without writing. And writing was introduced very, very late. It was derived from a late stage of Egyptian writing, the so-called Demotic, and they developed a highly simple system of just 23 signs, enough to write the sounds of the spoken language. We can read these texts since the beginning of the 20th century. Griffith has found the key to the phonetic values of these 23 signs, but until recently, about 10 years ago, there was an endless debate to which family of languages belongs Meroitic language. There were comparisons with Finno-Ugric languages in Eastern Europe. there were attempts to explain it by African languages, by Old Nubian. Now, Claude Rilly, our French colleague, who knows a lot of African dialects of Central and Northeastern Africa, has the final proof that Meroitic belongs to the Northeast Sudanic family of languages, dialects spoken in Kordofan, in Darfur, in Chad, all languages never written down and only documented in modern times by the microphone and then studied. So these are the most actual developments. And Claude Rilly now starts to understand for the first time in history, since antiquity, Meroitic texts.
And expecting a dictionary to be published.
We are urgently waiting of his first dictionary of Meroitic. He refuses that he is preparing it, but I know him personally quite well. I know he is on the best way, and this will be a question of some years until we have the first vocabulary, the first dictionary of Meroitic, and this will give us many, many new insights, since we have long historical texts, the stele from Hamadab, for instance,
yes,
which we don't understand. Also, the stele down here in this museum has a Meroitic inscription on the reverse, where we can read place names, but we don't know the rest. And inshallah, in 2 or 3 years, the situation will change, and this will...
Sudanese people definitely, as I told you before, very appreciating this effort to discover the historical ancient identity from the past. But before we come to a break, would like just to see if there is a connection between the past and the present. That means the same identity of the people that you have shown in the historical discoveries, and the people have a strong feeling about their past and historical identity right now. Do you see any connection between this historical past and the current?
I do, under 2 aspects. First, we notice in our work about ancient Sudan the very strong self-consciousness, the independence of mind of the Sudan. And this is one of the wonderful observations we make in our personal contacts with Sudanese colleagues and with our workers in the desert. This feeling of, let's say, pride to be Sudanese. And the second point is a little bit fantastic, perhaps, but I don't think so, and I hope it's not too optimistic. The Sudan, in antiquity, has been a bridge between South and North. Nowadays, the Sudan is member of the African Union and at the same time member of the Arab League. And I think the knowledge of the ancient history of the country could be, I wouldn't go so far as to say a guideline, but could be an aspect of orientation for the future role of this country in world politics, in the difficult situation of this region of Northeast Africa, near to Sudania, near to Europe, and still deeply African. We all hope, I think you too hope, that the Sudan one day can fulfill its chance, also based on the geographical situation, but also very much on his history.
This is very interesting. The question that Sudanese intellectual in different aspects of life sometimes give arguments that they might think that there is identity crisis in the history of Sudan. From your findings, your observation, you are involved in this for a long time. Do you have any indication, any historical findings that Sudan had or experienced before an identity crisis or not?
As far as we can see in antiquity, there has never been an identity crisis of the Sudanese. I'm deeply convinced that for Sudanese people, Egypt has always been the northern province of the Sudan. Unfortunately, for long periods of time, they separated from their intellectual and spiritual mother country, Sudan, and tried to be independent.
Continue our discussion. We found a lot of collections from Sudanese antiquities, and some has given by the Sudanese authority as long-term loan. Do you think this will help the visitors and the Europeans and the international citizen to understand well the Sudanese history and to know, the Sudanese ancient civilization on this?
Loans from the Sudan in our museums, in our case from our own excavations,
yes,
are very important under two aspects. First, they present our museum visitors authentic objects from this great civilization of highest beauty, as for instance the Isis statue down here. But the second aspect is perhaps even more important. The existence of loans from the Sudan in our museums is a sign of the open-minded spirit of this country, who understands itself as an integral part of the world community, of the civilized world. Sudan, as a modern nation, is present in our museums and therefore in our historical consciousness as an open country. And I think in our actual political situation, with polarization between Islamic and not Islamic, between East and West, North and South, our fruitful cooperation with the Sudan proves the contrary. It shows how cultural projects like archaeology can contribute to a deep mutual understanding, and therefore we are extremely grateful to our Sudanese colleagues and finally the Sudanese government. And I must say, I'm proud that one day your President Omar al-Bashir received me in the presidential palace and fixed the order of the 2 Niles on my jacket.
Some countries have requested that for Germany to bring back this kind of antiquities to their original country. And we have heard that there is a new law in Germany encouraging this kind of giving back these antiquities to their original countries.
There is, I think, a lot of misunderstanding created by the mass media.
Okay.
These questions are apparently of some interest for the normal, not informed public. I know what I'm speaking about. I have been for 20 years responsible for the world-famous bust of Nefertiti in the Berlin Egyptian Museum.
Yes.
And the then president of the Egyptian Antiquities Department, Zahi Hawass, again and again claimed the return by pretending that it was illegally exported. I just mentioned the official, not Zahi Hawass, but the official attitude of the Egyptian government expressed by the then ambassador of the Arab Republic of Egypt in Berlin, Mohammed al-Orabi, who once at an official manifestation in Berlin declared, Nefertiti is the permanent representative of Egypt in Germany.
It's very clear.
Not only on the safe side, but also Egypt knows what is reality. And the former Minister of Antiquities, Professor Mamdouh al-Damati, about 2 months ago, has given an interview to Al-Ahram Weekly, where he declared that more than 90% of the Egyptian antiquities in museums abroad have left the country legally.
So there is no any legal confusion about that. Professor Vildung, at the end of our this interesting interviews, would like to bring back the project of common aims that you celebrated in Khartoum, and you have an idea right now to bring back the common aims project. This in collaboration with the new discoveries and collaboration and partnership about the project in the northern Sudan with the Qatari Foundation. I would like to bring to the attention maybe of the audience this beautiful book, Naga, which displays the information and documentation of the excavation of Professor Vildung mission in Naga. It is in Arabic and English together here. And the Common Aims project is trying to continue the same collaboration and to give information about this common project and to have an exhibition maybe in Shandi or in Khartoum. But is to make the local people and the Sudanese people aware of their identity and their history. Can you give us a brief information about the common aims and common objectives and the cultural exchange that involved the embassy, Sudanese embassy in Berlin and the Sudanese embassy, the German embassy in Khartoum together?
First, I would like to add that this publication was made possible by a grant of the German Foreign Office, the Auswärtiges Amt, which has financed this book in Arab and in English. The exhibition Common Aims, Sudanese German Cooperation in Archaeology, shown in the Negmettin Sharif Memorial Hall in the National Museum in Khartoum in 2003, will be now resumed by Common Aims 2 about the actual ongoing German projects. I have prepared the 10 different poster presentations in Khartoum. This exhibition will include original objects from the different excavations. I hope that the exhibition in the Sudan after Khartoum can go, for instance, to Shendi, to Atbara, why not to Port Sudan, always forgotten a little bit. And then I will try, and His Excellency, the Ambassador of the Sudan in Berlin, Badr al-Din Mohammed Abdallah, has promised me yesterday his help to show this exhibition as a poster presentation in the Foreign Office in Berlin, in Cologne, in Hamburg, in Munich, in Stuttgart, and other cities in Germany, to show our German public what they would miss if they wouldn't know more about ancient Sudan. This is realistic. It's a project which is not too expensive, and I think we can convince the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Auswärtiges Amt, to help us in this small but important project, Common Aims Reloaded.
The final word will be about your exchange with the Sudanese people? You work in the field over there. You interact with the local community over there. Did you have a conducive atmosphere working in Sudan, interacting with the people, knowing their culture, and facilitating your work over there?
We are in daily interaction with local population in the excavation. We have up to 70 or 80 people living in the desert, coming to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours walking by feet or on their donkey. And they have developed over the years a kind of pride to live in an ancient city of their country where even the president is coming by his helicopter, and they protect the site. They listen to cars when they are still far away and say, look, that nothing illegal happens there. They are the perfect protection. And for us, it's simply wonderful to see the great fun they have in rediscovering their past.
There is a self-conscious about their history right now.
Yeah, I wish that the intellectual milieu in Khartoum, in the cities, in the universities, would take up what our nomads in the desert already do.
This is the collaboration with other universities in archaeology. Do you have any collaboration with other universities in Sudan, like University of Shandi or Khartoum, in archaeology?
Of course, we had, as you know, last year this cooperation forum, the Sudanese German Cooperation Forum in Higher Education and Scientific Research. We were deeply impressed by the presentation of the different universities all over the country. A high standard of research in many different fields. Of course, this forum was concentrating on agriculture, on medicine, on social sciences, on economic sciences, but there were also several projects. For instance, Shandi University. Shandi could become a center of archaeological research since it's a university nearest to the sites of Mere, Musawarat,
yes,
Wat Banaga and Naga, and I had a long, very, very promising talk with the president of Shandi University when we made an excursion after the cooperation forum, and I'm sure Shandi, but also Karima and other places more to the north have the potential, and to establish archaeology at Sudanese universities is of crucial importance, since we have to teach young people, to give young people a feeling for the history of their country, and you should try to influence also the curricula of primary schools and high schools. As far as I know, ancient history has not yet its place it deserves in the teaching programs of primary schools and high schools. This is the point where everything should start.
لا نجد أعزائي المشاهدين بعد هذه الإفادات المهمة والعميقة والممتعة ما نختم به هذا اللقاء من داخل متحف المصريات بمدينة ميونخ حاضرة إقليم بافاريا. البروفيسور فيلدونغ طوف على العديد من صفحات التاريخ، استعرض العديد من القضايا التاريخية المهمة وإسهام الحضارة السودانية في دعم وإسهام الحضارة الإنسانية عموما. من أهم النقاط التي ذكرها ولا بد أن نذكر بها الناس والمسؤولين على وجه الخصوص أن تاريخ وحضارة السودان القديمة لا توجد بالقدر الكافي في المقررات المدرسية في مرحلة الأساس ولا حتى المرحلة الثانوية. هذه مهمة جدا من أجل إعادة أو التذكير بأهمية الهوية التاريخية للسودان. هذه نقطة مهمة جدا ذكرها بروفيسور فيلدون. أيضا ذكر أن الحضارة السودانية القديمة هي الأصل في وادي النيل الأساس، ومن ثم تحولت إلى شمال وادي النيل، وأن النظرة يجب أن تكون من الجنوب نحو الشمال وليس من الشمال نحو الجنوب. والسودان أيضا في هويته التاريخية كان نقطة التقاء عميقة جدا بين البحر المتوسط وحضارته العميقة وبين أفريقيا. السودان في حديثه هو مهد الحضارة في هذه المنطقة، وتقدم عليها وتفوق عليها بمنتجاته وبإسهامه التاريخي.